My name is Hanan, and I am one of the Syrian refugees who were welcomed to Canada under the government support program for Syrian refugees. I'm currently a Ryerson student and I'm majoring in politics and governance and minoring in law. And in 2019, I was selected to be one of Daughters of the Vote for Equal Voice program representing the federal riding of Scarborough-Guildwood. And today I'm so honored and excited to host this live chat with Mr. John McKay, the Member of Parliament for Scarborough-Guildwood, and also the Chair of the Standing Committee for the Public Safety and National Security. Mr. McKay, welcome. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you again, even if it is virtually.
Right. Thank you so much. And before we get started and learn about your experience welcoming Syrian refugees, I just wanted to give a little bit of introduction about the story of welcoming refugees to Canada for those who are watching us now. So in March 2011, Syrians demonstrated peacefully for one of their basic human rights, the freedom of speech, and the government regime responded by destroying their houses and by killing and displacing thousands and millions of refugees, Syrian refugees. And here, Canadians and the government of Canada responded to this humanitarian crisis by welcoming over 40,000 Syrian refugees. And if you're wondering how did that happen, so over the span of 100 days, the government of Canada worked so closely with Canadians from coast to coast to coast, worked with the sponsorship groups, with non-governmental organizations, and of course with the provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, and with the support and help from international partners. And they welcomed 25 Syrian refugees by the end of February 2016. And after February 2016, a lot of sponsor groups worked with the government of Canada to welcome more Syrian refugees, and the number ended to be over 40,000 Syrian refugees. And Mr. McKay, in 2019, we met in Ottawa at the House of Commons. Thanks so much for sharing your seat with me. It was a great learning experience for me to learn about the political system as a Syrian refugee. And I remember we chatted about my journey coming to Canada and your journey welcoming Syrian refugees, and in specific Syrian Armenians. So tell us more about your journey welcoming Syrians to Scarborough-Guildwood.
My journey to Scarborough-Guildwood? My journey is Scarborough-Guildwood starts in 1848.
The welcoming Syrian refugees to Scarborough-Guildwood.
Oh, the welcoming. I thought
Yes.
that's my journey. My ancestors came over on what were called coffin ships.
Mm-hmm.
But that's many years ago. No, it was actually one of those moments in Canadian history, and where if you will, the morality and the outpouring of gut sympathy coincided with a new political leader who had instinctively reacted to the plight of the Syrian refugees, and through both the election process, but also the machinery of government, set up a humanitarian response, which I think, in my lifetime at least, is only similar to the one of the Vietnamese being welcomed to Canada after the war. It was an outstanding response on the part of Canadians that made me frankly quite proud.
Amazing. And to just like maybe relate on the government action, I know at that time when a lot of Syrians came to Canada, it was the Liberal Party, the majority government, and of course they put a lot of effort in welcoming that big number of Syrian refugees, working closely with those local organizations and community members. In your opinion, and as someone who works for the party, what are the lessons that we learned from welcoming those Syrian refugees? And as you mentioned, it's a humanitarian crisis, and how that is affecting now or influencing our refugee policy in Canada.
I think the biggest lesson learned is when the people of Canada are engaged, the process goes much more smoothly and is much more effective than when the refugees are just welcomed by government services and bureaucrats, for want of a better term. When the people of Canada engaged, that this whole process really started to take off.
For sure. And for me, when I came here, I was so overwhelmed with the support from Canadians. And I think what made me feel like I'm coming all the way to Canada, a different system. I was the only child who spoke English. So for me, having Canadians supporting me and telling me, hey, it's okay, we're here to support you, was a great thing for me, like as a person who's coming to a country that I didn't know about that much, right? So so of course, that's, I think I agree with you. That's the best part.
You have adapted brilliantly, but I dare say that some of your fellow refugees have not adapted quite brilliantly. But just to circle back in on the response of Canadians, so within my own family, my daughter organized a group out in Cambridge, and I think there were about 6 or 8 people from her church. Some people were able to contribute money, others time, and they brought in a family, and it was real eye-opening. It was really eye-opening for Sarah and her family and the group, and it was not without challenges. And what was interesting in this particular case, the children had a lot of dental needs.
Oh wow!
And Sarah was able to organize that. Mom actually adjusted fairly well.
That's so true.
Yeah, and I hear this over and over again. Dad, not so much.
Yeah.
So Dad wanted to stay with the people that he knew.
Right.
And I've actually had a cause to reflect on that. You know, were I in that kind of situation? My guess is that my wife would adapt a lot better than I would. Because for the man, it's the loss of status. It's the loss of status in society. It's the loss of status in his own family.
Exactly.
And meanwhile, the kids and mom are adapting at a much more rapid pace.
Right.
Even on my own street, we had a woman who again organized through a church, a local church, and they brought over 2 families, one of which had real challenges because mom had a disability, and the child had known nothing but refugee camp.
Wow.
And he was running wild. And I saw my friend Greg, who's just, as I say, just up the street, a very solid guy, step in, become kind of a substitute father for that kid, and you know, teach him basic stuff about how you behave as a boy. And it was really quite touching to watch Greg walk our street with the boy, and this kid is just running, like would think nothing of running into other people's houses and and being quite disruptive.
Absolutely.
Anyways, very personal experiences, but observational experiences. And of course, in Scarborough, we have the Armenian church. In Scarborough-Guildwood, we have the Armenian church. And I think they brought in something like 3,500 families.
Wow. That's a big one.
Between the church there, the one in North York, and the Montreal folks. And from time to time, I've gone to the church to see how people are doing. And, again, you have a supportive group. You have Canadians behind it. Even better if they speak the language.
I know.
And understand the culture.
They integrated so well.
Become real assets to Canada very quickly.
Yeah, like I read research and I was actually working on a research and my findings in the research were Syrian refugees integrated like faster in the community. They volunteer, they make friends, and they're also establishing businesses and they're contributing so much to the community. And maybe that's something we can elaborate more. And then I wanted to ask you through this experience and those stories that you're sharing, what is one story that inspired you of those Syrian refugees in Canada? I know a lot of them started businesses and like we heard so much, maybe someone from Scarborough from your writing or someone maybe like you heard about in Canada. So if you share that with us, that would be amazing.
Well, I'll just circle back in on our neighbors. They only live about 3 or 4 doors up from us, and Kim and Greg organized this group, and we're the driving forces behind it. My wife got involved peripherally. And I don't think they understood what they were getting into when this family came, and didn't realize that mom had a serious disability,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore finding housing for her would be very challenging because there were
Right.
certain kinds of housing that couldn't be. And then clearly didn't understand what the child was going to be like. And Greg was Greg was pretty impressive. You know, not only just walking the kids, but taking the kid to school and introducing him to the teachers and talking to the teachers, saying this kid's going to be pretty wild in your class.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing is, you know, people start with a lot of enthusiasm, but the ones that start don't necessarily finish. And it's pretty hard. So it ends up with, you know, 5 or 6 or 7 people, and at the end, maybe you only got 2 or 3.
Right.
So by and large, pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And now, like the lockdown, of course it's a challenging time for Canadians, and not only for Canadians, for people across the world. And through my, like, I'm currently working with newcomers, and through the work that I do, I find that a lot of challenges are facing those newcomers, from language barrier to even like the gaps in the system, and not being able to access those services. So but then, like, you know, like we have to follow to the government officials and like the health officials like messages, and to deal with the COVID restrictions. And of course, in your writing, you're connecting, and I know you're doing a lot of virtual town hall, which is amazing for people in Scarborough to ask questions and connect with you. So how are Syrian refugees and maybe the recent newcomers and recent immigrants are dealing with COVID restrictions? What support are you offering in your writing for those communities?
Well, by and large, if you're a landed refugee, you'll get the same support services
Right.
as Canadians. If you've lost your job, then you're entitled to serve, et cetera, et cetera. I think the big issue is navigating the system,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what our office offers is system navigation for you. It's confusing for people who've lived here all their lives,
Mm-hmm.
and the government has been rolling out program after program after program, and it's bewildering. You know, whether it's served, or whether it's a rental program, or whether it's a transition to EI, or it's you know, trying to help with a small business, and the documentation you have to prove, have to be able to show to the government so you can prove that you lost money and things of that nature. So I don't. I think the most complimentary thing I can say about the Syrian refugees is that we haven't noticed. You know, we haven't really noticed that they're struggling any more or any less than others, and that's a real compliment to the community,
Mm-hmm.
because you know, after 5 years of living in a foreign country, not necessarily speaking the language, and having all of the challenges, and then throwing in the pandemic on top,
Mm-hmm.
there's I want to say that, well, there's nothing special about them. You know, they're doing okay.
They integrated so well. That's so true. And I think what I found that and I remember I reached out to you, and of course you were so supportive, support that during, like, when the pandemic and the lockdown happened, a lot of refugees were facing mostly the elderly, and the issue was they're not able to understand whatever the government or even the health officials are communicating with them. But here, of course, it's, I know, like, the government is busy and like implementing those services and supporting local businesses and everyone. So I worked closely with Welcome Home Toronto and MCIS, the Language Solutions. And what we did, we translated videos by MPs and documented by leaders to tell them the stories and what's going on, but it translated it to their own languages. And that was really helpful. So it's, again, as you mentioned, it's not only the Syrian community, they integrated so much, but that was a need for a lot of communities. Like we found that Chinese are interested. A lot of them, they didn't learn English too, even though they've been here for a long of time. But yeah, like, I'm so glad my community integrated so well. That makes me so happy. And we're chatting today for 15 minutes just to talk about this journey and celebrate this journey. So from your experience, talking about working with refugees and welcoming them, and also sharing their success stories and that they're integrating so well in the community. Of course, there are challenges, and those challenges exist, but we can overcome those challenges to make them a learning experience. So here I wanted to ask you a question. What is the one advice you would like to give to Syrian refugees who integrated, or for those who are coming recently to Scarborough-Guildwood or to Canada in general?
Don't give up.
Don't give up. I agree.
That's it. But that was communicated to me by, I've forgotten who it was, but it was one of the people like yourself. I just can't remember who it was, but it was quite simple. Don't give up. And I can only imagine what it's like to flee from people shooting at you from both sides and ending up in some refugee camp, and then one day you win the lottery and you're on an airplane to Toronto.
Exactly.
There must be a huge welter of emotions, and then you arrive in this city and everybody looks like you and nobody looks like you. You know,
the cultural shock sometimes. Yep. It's a cultural.
In particular is so multicultural, and it must be absolutely bewildering to come into an environment where it is so multicultural when you come from a largely monocultural environment. So to be at the 5-year stage, and it's not as if there's without problems. I hope I'm not communicating any naivety here, but at least to be at a stage where there are not unique and outstanding problems to the Syrian refugee community. That's a pretty big compliment to the community.
For sure. And I also wanted to add one advice from my experience as a Syrian refugee to this country. I think the number one that helped me to integrate and to learn English and just to be part of the community and develop that sense of belonging here is volunteering. I found that volunteering in the community is not about just I give back to the country that gave me so much and welcomed me and gave me a safe home, but it's also for you to be able to improve your English, to learn about the system, to navigate those gaps that most of the time is hard to find solution for those gaps. And of course, to connect and make friends. And maybe one day you start your own initiatives, you can find jobs, and like you can start your own businesses. So volunteering was the solution for me to integrate. And especially during the pandemic, a lot of organizations are looking to support your needs and for you to support their needs. So whether you speak 2 languages or whether you know how to use the computer or you have good communication skills, reach out to those organizations and support their needs. I will, for those who are watching and are newcomers, not specifically Syrians, I'm going to add my email address. I'm currently working with a nonprofit and engage with a lot of organizations. I'm happy to share those resources with you and connect with you if you are willing to volunteer. That's what I wanted to share today. And thanks so much for watching. And thanks so much, Mr. McKay. This is absolutely amazing. And I'm so thankful and grateful for your work for the Syrian community and also for my fellow Canadians in Scarborough-Guildwood.
And don't give up.
Don't give up.